When people talk about serial killers, most immediately think of the United States. And rightly so, as the country has seen an enormous number of them. Yet among all these killers, there are a few who stand out from the rest. In today's video, we'll explore the story of one such monster, the Golden State Killer. The Golden State Killer was one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. He struck across California, hunting innocent victims from Sacramento all the way down to Orange County. According to the police, the infamous Golden State Killer was a monster who lived right among us, hiding behind the mask of an ordinary life. His ordinary days were followed by horrifying nights. Under the cover of darkness, he broke into homes, terrorized families, and left behind a trail of destruction unlike anything America had ever seen before. In total, he had at least 106 victims, of whom at least 13 were murdered. Those who survived endured unimaginable suffering. The most terrifying part was that for decades, police were completely in the dark about who he was. According to top criminologists, this killer was one of the most sophisticated and precise criminal minds in American history. For over 30 years, he managed to remain hidden, living as an entirely ordinary man. Now, let's head to the West Coast and uncover the dark and disturbing details behind the Golden State Killer's crimes. The killer studied his targets for weeks, sometimes even months. In 1976, the suburbs of Sacramento seemed safe and peaceful. But after nightfall, while unsuspecting families slept soundly in their homes, one man was watching their every move. Once he chose his victims, he spent days and nights learning their routines. He knew when they went to work, when they went to bed, when the kids came home from practice, who visited them, and most importantly, when they turned in for the night. He often broke into homes beforehand to prepare everything, cutting phone lines, mapping the layout of the rooms, unlocking windows, and hiding the bindings he would later use during his attacks. Some victims later reported noticing strange things before the assaults, a window mysteriously left open or small objects moved out of place. But they didn't think much of it at the time. It never crossed their minds that they were about to come face to face with a ruthless predator. The Golden State Killer's attacks followed a terrifyingly precise pattern. In the middle of the night, victims would wake to find a masked man standing over them, shining a flashlight directly into their faces. He was always armed and quickly took control of the situation, feeding off the fear he created. Through clenched teeth, he would whisper to his victims, "If you move, I'll kill you." Back in 1974, the city of Visalia was plagued by a series of break-ins committed by a burglar who soon became known as the Visalia Ransacker. When we think of burglaries, we usually imagine thieves stealing valuables. That's the point, after all. But in this case, things were different. He broke into houses, but rarely stole anything of real worth. Instead, he spent hours rifling through his victims' personal belongings. In bedrooms, he scattered women's underwear around and took strange souvenirs: an earring, family photographs, children's piggy banks, stamps. Sometimes he didn't take anything at all. He just moved things around, as if playing a psychological game with the homeowners. He wasn't driven by greed. He was driven by a thirst for power. Because the burglar never physically harmed anyone, police didn't take the crimes too seriously at first. They simply warned residents to keep their doors locked at night. But soon, the intruder escalated. Burglary alone no longer satisfied him. On the morning of September 11, 1975, Claude Snelling, a journalism professor, was awakened by strange noises in his Visalia home. He heard sounds coming from downstairs, and when he went to check, he found the back door open. In the garage, he saw a masked man dragging his 16-year-old daughter toward the street, apparently trying to abduct her. Acting on instinct, Snelling lunged at the attacker to protect his daughter. The intruder fired 2 shots, both hitting Snelling. Though he managed to stumble back into the house, he collapsed in the hallway and died from his wounds. The assailant struck the young girl but fled immediately after the gunfire, leaving her behind. As it turned out, this murder marked the beginning of years of terror caused by one man. The Visalia Ransacker disappeared in December 1975, shortly after shooting at a detective who had nearly caught him during a stakeout. The bullet missed the officer's face by mere inches, and only sheer luck saved his life. After that, the suspect vanished, and the Visalia burglaries abruptly stopped. Police assumed the unknown criminal had panicked and decided to quit. Unfortunately, as later became clear, that wasn't the case. He had simply moved on to a new hunting ground, where his crimes became far more violent than ever before. By June 1976, a new predator was terrorizing the eastern suburbs of Sacramento. His methods were far more sophisticated, and his attacks far more brutal. One of his earliest known assaults occurred on June 18, 1976. A young woman living alone woke up to find a man standing over her bed. He tied her hands with shoelaces, stuffed her mouth with strips of towel, and assaulted her for hours. Before leaving, the intruder ate some chicken from her refrigerator, drank a beer, and left the empty can in the backyard like a grotesque calling card. This would later become one of his trademarks. Within months, his attacks grew bolder. On October 5th, he committed 2 assaults in one night, first attacking a woman in Citrus Heights, then only hours later striking again in Rancho Cordova. After these incidents, a clear pattern emerged. All attacks occurred at night, and the victims were always women living alone. The community was paralyzed with fear. Women bought pepper spray and firearms. Men organized neighborhood patrols, but none of it helped. The crimes continued unabated. As the attacker's confidence grew, so did his audacity. By the summer of 1977, he changed his pattern. This time he began hunting couples. Newspapers had repeatedly emphasized that the unknown man preyed only on weak, defenseless women. Apparently, that wounded his pride, because soon men became his targets too. He began focusing on houses where couples lived. During these attacks, he forced the woman to tie up her male partner, then spent hours assaulting her while the man lay helpless, forced to listen to the horror. One victim later recalled that after tying up her husband and forcing him to lie on the floor, the Golden State Killer placed dishes on his back and warned, "If I hear a plate fall, I'll kill you both." He then returned to the woman and assaulted her for hours, while the man remained motionless, paralyzed with fear, listening to the nightmare unfold. Some victims lay still for hours afterward, too terrified to move, hearing the attacker rummaging through their homes. He would go into the kitchen, eat food from their fridge, and steal small items of little monetary value, but of great personal significance to the victims. One of the most horrifying attacks occurred on October 29, 1977. A married couple in Sacramento awoke to see a masked man standing in their bedroom doorway, the beam of his flashlight glinting off his ski mask. For the next 3 hours, he terrorized them. He tied them both up, repeatedly raped the wife, ate and drank from their refrigerator, and before leaving, stood in the living room sobbing and muttering, "I'm sorry, Mommy. I'm sorry, Mommy," over and over again. Then he vanished into the night. By the end of 1977, his attacks had become frighteningly frequent. Between September and December alone, he committed 6 assaults, leaving residents in constant fear. At community meetings, people expressed their rage and desperation. One man stood up and said, "If that man ever comes into my house, I'll kill him. I'll protect my wife and my family." A few weeks later, he and his wife became victims too. By 1978, even the brutal assaults no longer satisfied his bloodlust. His violence escalated further, and now his crimes often ended in murder. Something changed that year. On February 2, 1978, Brian and Katie Maggiore were walking their dog in Rancho Cordova when they encountered a masked man. It's not known what they saw, perhaps his face, or perhaps they caught him in the act of breaking into a home, but whatever it was, it cost them their lives. The couple tried to run, but the Golden State Killer chased them down. He shot Brian first, then shot Katie in the head as she screamed for help. Police were desperate to catch him, but the killer seemed to relish taunting them. In December 1977, he called the Sacramento police and said, "You'll never catch me. Tonight I'm going hunting again. Be careful." Officers immediately went on high alert, and hours later, a call came in. Someone had seen a masked man riding a bicycle through a suburban neighborhood. Police rushed to the scene within minutes, flooding the area with patrols, but the mysterious man had vanished without a trace. After the murder of the Maggiore couple, the killer once again sought a new hunting ground. By 1979, the attacks had spread south to Southern California. They continued there, but now nearly every assault ended in death. He would either attack couples in bed and bludgeon them with household objects, or hunt single women, whom he raped and then killed. On October 1st in Goleta near Santa Barbara, one couple narrowly escaped with their lives. They woke to find a man standing in their bedroom. As he tied them up, they heard him muttering to himself, "I'll kill them! I'll kill them!" From his voice alone, they immediately knew it wasn't an empty threat. When the killer briefly left the room, the couple managed to free themselves from their bindings, climbed out through a window, and fled. The woman screamed for help, neighbors called the police, and a nearby FBI agent joined the chase, pursuing the attacker through several streets. Unfortunately, the killer escaped once again. This time, however, he left behind a bicycle and a knife. The first solid physical evidence in the case in years. 2 months later, he returned to Goleta, and this time there were no survivors. On December 30th, he broke into the home of Dr. Robert Offerman and Dr. Deborah Manning. When investigators arrived the next morning, they found a horrific scene. Both victims had been shot multiple times. After killing them, the murderer ate leftovers from their Christmas turkey in the refrigerator. In March 1980, he struck again in Ventura. Lyman and Charlene Smith were found beaten to death in their bed. The murder weapon was a piece of firewood. But there was something unusual about the scene. Charlene had been tied with intricate diamond knots, the kind commonly used in sailing. The summer of 1980 brought another nightmare. Keith and Patrice Harrington, a young newlywed couple from Dana Point, became the next victims. Keith was a fourth-year medical student. Patrice was a pediatric nurse. They had been married only 3 months. The killer broke into their home at night, tied them up, raped Patrice, and then bludgeoned them both so savagely that Patrice's face was left unrecognizable. Between murders, the Golden State Killer didn't rest. He especially enjoyed tormenting his previous victims with phone calls. Sometimes he would only breathe heavily into the receiver. Other times he would whisper, "Hello, it's me." One survivor even received a call 27 years after her attack. The man simply laughed on the other end of the line. His voice was unmistakable. In February 1981, Manuela Vithun became his next victim. Her husband was in the hospital at the time, leaving her alone in their Irvine home, and the killer knew it. That night, he broke in and murdered her. When investigators arrived, they found the house ransacked. The killer had clearly spent hours there after the murder, rummaging through their belongings, and of course, eating from their refrigerator. By midsummer that same year, he struck again. Cherry Domingo and Gregory Sanchez were spending the night in a house in Goleta that was up for sale. Sanchez heard the intruder and confronted him. The attacker shot him in the face, yet Sanchez still managed to charge at him. The killer responded with brutal force, beating Sanchez's head so savagely that investigators later found fragments of skull scattered throughout the room. He then turned on Cherry Domingo, tied her up, raped her, and beat her to death. This was the final act before the attacks suddenly stopped. Perhaps the killer sensed that police were closing in. For 5 years, it seemed as though the nightmare was finally over. Then, as if to remind the world of his existence, the American press erupted again in May 1986. In Irvine, 18-year-old Janelle Cruz was home alone while her family vacationed in Mexico. One night, the killer broke in and murdered the young woman. After that, he seemed to vanish forever. The investigation intensified like never before. For decades, authorities tried to find the man, all in vain. After so many years, investigators began to wonder if he was even still alive. Arguments broke out among law enforcement agencies about whether it was worth dedicating dozens of officers and vast resources to pursue someone who had disappeared for decades and who might already be dead. It was as if the killer sensed this, because soon he made contact again. In 2001, one of his victims, a woman he had attacked back in 1977, received a phone call. When she answered, a chilling voice said, "Remember when we played?" That call reignited the investigation. One major setback had been that police never connected the Visalia ransacker burglaries with the Golden State Killer murders. The crimes seemed too varied, too fragmented. From time to time, potential suspects emerged, but each was eventually eliminated for one reason or another. By the early 2010s, the investigation had hit another dead end, and even the most determined detectives began to lose hope. Then, in 2018, investigators tried something revolutionary. The renewed effort was led by Paul Holes, a retired detective who had pursued the killer for 24 years. They decided to use a new tool, genetic genealogy. They uploaded the killer's DNA profile, the one found on the bicycle he had abandoned during one escape, to GED Match, a public genealogy database people use for family history research. When the program returned a close match to a registered user, the police could hardly believe their eyes. It was a distant cousin, someone who shared a common ancestor with the killer going back to the 19th century. From that point on, a team of 5 investigators and a genealogist, Barbara Ray Venter, began building massive family trees containing more than 1,000 people. Working backward from old census records, newspaper articles, and gravestones, they traced lines of descent until they finally found someone who fit the profile. And that person turned out to be Joseph James DeAngelo. DeAngelo was born on November 8, 1945, in Bath, New York. His childhood was full of trauma and instability. While he was still a small boy, the family lived in West Germany because his father served in the military. One day, DeAngelo allegedly watched as 2 soldiers raped his 7-year-old sister in a warehouse. That event left a deep mark on him. It distorted his relationship with both sex and violence. His sister Becca later said that their father regularly beat and abused Joseph during his childhood. The family eventually settled in Sacramento, where DeAngelo attended high school and played on the baseball team. But warning signs were already present. Later it emerged that in his teenage years, DeAngelo committed burglaries, mail theft, and animal cruelty. In 1964, Joseph joined the Navy, perhaps to straighten out his life, as he put it, and served 22 months during the Vietnam War. But military discipline and a structured life did not reform him. If anything, they honed the criminal within. The skills he learned in service, discipline, tactics, the art of concealment, would later serve him well when he turned to crime. After his discharge, DeAngelo studied criminal justice to further prepare himself for his future career. He first earned an associate degree in police science, then a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Sacramento State University. At that time, he appeared to be an ordinary man trying to live a normal life. Soon he met Bonnie Caldwell, and they formed a relatively stable relationship for a while. She was my first serious relationship. I had no dating experience. It started out easy and happy between us, Bonnie later recalled. He proposed to her in 1970. But DeAngelo could only play the normal man role for a time. The darkness inside him soon surfaced. As he tried to suppress his demons, he became increasingly manipulative and violent. Just like his father, he took out his anger on Bonnie. Bonnie, however, was smart, and a year after their engagement, she broke off the relationship. DeAngelo could not accept rejection. After the breakup, he put a pistol to Bonnie's head and tried to force her to marry him. As you can imagine, that didn't work, Bonnie later said. I escaped, but being engaged to him is one of the biggest regrets of my life. The whole episode seared into DeAngelo's consciousness. His inability to control the relationship ate at him from the inside. Years later, during one attack, victims heard him sobbing and muttering, "I hate you, Bonnie." That breakup had left such a deep impression, as if he believed that if Bonnie had stayed with him, everything might have been different. DeAngelo served as a police officer in the early years of the crimes, in Exeter from 1973 to 1976, and then in Auburn from 1976 to 1979. He attended police briefings where his own crimes were discussed, so he knew exactly how they would try to catch him. He was fired from Auburn after stealing a dog alarm and a hammer, tools that could have been useful in the crimes. His age, military training, which explained his tactical knowledge, physical fitness, and residence in the same areas where the murders took place all matched the profile. But to officially charge him, investigators needed a fresh DNA sample to confirm their theory. At that point, detectives placed DeAngelo under surveillance. They followed him to a Hobby Lobby store and collected DNA from a discarded drink bottle and a tissue. Those DNA samples matched the DNA recovered from the crime scenes. After 44 years, they finally had their man. On April 24, 2018, police surrounded DeAngelo's home in Citrus Heights, California. When they arrested him, the man who had once terrorized entire cities was living a quiet suburban life. He was married, had raised 3 daughters, and worked as a truck mechanic until his retirement. After his arrest, while in the interrogation room, DeAngelo was recorded talking to himself, just as many victims had described hearing him do during his attacks. He spoke about an alter ego named Jerry, who he claimed had forced him to commit the murders. He said, "I didn't have the strength to push him out. He made me do it. He came with me. He was in my head. He was part of me. I didn't want to do those things. If I could have gotten rid of Jerry, I might have had a happy life. But Jerry always controlled me, and now I have to pay the price." On June 29, 2020, Joseph DeAngelo finally faced justice. He pleaded guilty to 13 counts of murder and 13 counts of kidnapping, and admitted to dozens of assaults that could no longer be prosecuted due to the statute of limitations. In August 2020, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Before sentencing, the victims and their families confronted him in court over 3 emotional days, sharing stories of pain, trauma, and survival. Some had waited more than 40 years for that moment. When given the chance to speak, DeAngelo said quietly, "I've listened to all your statements, every single one, and I want to say that I am truly sorry for everyone I've hurt." The case of the Golden State Killer forever changed the history of criminal investigation. It was the first time genetic genealogy had been used to identify a killer, marking the beginning of a new era in solving cold cases. Since DeAngelo's arrest, more than 150 other previously unsolved cases have been cracked using the same technique across the United States. And it reminded us of one chilling truth: monsters don't always look like monsters. For decades, Joseph DeAngelo lived what seemed like a perfectly normal, respectable life. He coached his daughter's softball team, worked side by side with his colleagues, all while committing horrific acts at night. He was one of the most evil and ruthless serial killers in American history. But thanks to persistent police work, advances in technology, and a bit of luck, he is now behind bars and will never walk free again. Perhaps the survivors and the victims' families can take some comfort in knowing that after 40 years, the truth was finally revealed and justice was done. Still, nothing can erase the immense pain and suffering that so many endured because of Joseph James DeAngelo. What do you think? How was he able to remain unidentified for 40 years? Did his position in law enforcement help him avoid capture? And could his family really have had no idea all those years? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts about the case, so please share them in the comments, and let's discuss the story of the Golden State Killer together. Thank you so much for watching. We'll meet again in the next video. Until then, take care and have a great day.